Welcome, everyone. Okay, today is an important topic because it's probably something that you have not realized that could be occurring for your pets and could be creating a lot of problems, and you're missing the root cause potentially. So, what we're going to discuss today is the gut brain connection and why the microbiome, why the gut is so important. So, who here, drop in the comments if you feel so inclined on this beautiful Friday morning. Let me know, is your pet kind of like anxious, maybe a little bit reactive? They're having trouble like learning new things, or you're just like, why are they kind of like a bit spazzy, right? You know what I mean, right? I see you guys. Awesome. Hello. Thanks for joining us. Good morning, Diane and Yemika. Let me know. Is your pet, your dog or your cat, experiencing anything like anxiety, extra stress? They have a hard time calming down? Because if they are, we need to look to the gut because of the gut brain connection. So if you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. I'm Dr. Katie Woodley, the natural pet doctor. I'm an integrative, holistic veterinarian, and I'm on a mission to make sure you, as the amazing pet parent that you are, don't feel alone. You become confident and empowered that you are figuring out the root cause to your pet's health problems, and you're taking that proactive approach to help them live their best and longest, healthiest lives. So if you're excited about today's topic about gut brain connection, give me a thumbs up or a heart or whatever it is that you can send me. I want to see that you are here and ready to learn about a lot of the research that we have. And here's the cool thing. Not a human doctor. However, a lot of this can apply to you. So keep that in mind when we're talking about this gut brain connection. A lot of the studies are done in animals and then it's used in people. So a lot of these tips and tools I'm going to provide for you today can actually be used to help you improve your overall health. We can all get healthier together. So if you're excited about that, let's go. All right. So this week on Coffee Talk with the Doc, which you are all here for, let's dive into what exactly is the gut brain axis. Who here's have you heard of the gut brain axis? Let me know in the comments. I love seeing your comments. I see them. So definitely let me know. Have you heard about the gut brain axis? Now, what this is that it's a bi-directional communication. So what that means, there's signals coming down, there's signals going up. And it's that connection from the gut to the brain through the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is our 10th cranial nerve. It's one of the biggest nerves in our body, and it innervates a lot of really important organs, from the heart to the diaphragm to the intestines. And so if this vagus nerve is a bit irritated or inflamed, or we're getting bad communication, which we're going to talk about why that can happen, then it's going to affect things like gut motility. It can affect the hormones productions, neurotransmitter productions. Really, really important. It can also impact the microbiome. Now, we've talked a lot about the microbiome in the past. If you haven't heard those previous discussions, make sure you go back to our previous Coffee Talks with the Docs. Best place, easiest place to find it is go to our YouTube channel, Dr. Katie Woodley, the Natural Pet Doctor. Go to the live section. You can see all the replays. So make sure you learn about this thing called the microbiome, because this is where trillions of different types of microorganisms, from bacteria, fungi, protozoa, are all living hopefully together in a harmonious ecosystem. They're hopefully all working together to make sure we're breaking down, digesting food, that we are reducing inflammation, that we're producing the proper amount of hormones, neurotransmitters, short chain fatty acids. So the thing is, though, a lot of people don't realize, though, that the power these microbes have in our gut. Now, these gut microbes are actually shaping your pet's immune system. They're shaping neuronal development, the nerve development. They're shaping the brain biochemistry, and they're also shaping the behavior of your pet. So, who here's ever felt like a bit crazy, right? Like, I mean, the past few years have been a bit wild for everyone, wherever you are in the world. And it can be easy to chalk it up to external factors. But the thing is that because of this bi-directional communication, a lot of times what happens is the stress that we're feeling because of external factors is actually directly impacting the microbiome and changing the microbes. It's changing potentially the diversity. It can be changing the production of some of these neurotransmitters and chemicals. So it's not you just being crazy. There's actually a physiological response. And the neat thing is there's a lot of stuff that we can do naturally without medications to help rebalance it and get it back into homeostasis. That means balance. So when we're looking at this gut brain connection, we have to look at the different channels of communication because there's so many different ways that everything's talking to each other. One of the downsides with conventional medicine is that we tend to kind of isolate and we look at everything as being separate and disconnected from one another. And that's the power and the beauty of applying a holistic approach. Now, when I say holistic, I mean with a W. So whole body, holistic approach. We are looking at how everything is interconnected and working together. So if we have a gut problem, I'm not just looking at digestion. I'm going to look at what other systems may be off. So some of the different channels of communication that we need to be looking at when we're thinking about the gut and the brain speaking and talking and working together are going to be some things that are a bit scientific, but we need to go through them because they're really important. So the first channel of communication is what we call the enteric nervous system. Now, this is where you might have heard about like the second brain in the body. And a lot of people will actually talk about this being the first brain. And this is where that's that vagus nerve, this connection with the nervous system and the gut. So the gut is actually lined with a lot of nerves that are speaking and talking with those microbes. And then we have that big vagus nerve, cranial nerve 10, that's then connecting the gut all the way up to the brain. It's making a few stops along the way, and then it's also coming back down. So there's communication with that. We also have the sympathetic nervous system. Who here has heard of the sympathetic nervous system? Let me know if you've heard of it. Sympathetic nervous system. This is like the fight or flight response. So this is it, this is where the stress hormones, noradrenaline, norepinephrine, they're all going to be released from the brain. Adrenal glands, they're going to specifically affect gut motility. When we think about if we're stuck in a sympathetic nervous system response, this is the fight or flight. And so this is where, okay, is this the time for digestion if we're running from the lion? No, it's not. So the blood flow will actually get redirected away from the gut. But the problem here is that a lot of times pets and people get stuck in chronic stress states. Now, this can occur if you're like dealing with a chronic illness, chronic inflammation. That's going to put your pet or your pet's body and even yourselves into a sympathetic nervous system dominant state. We see this a lot on hair tissue mineral analysis tests. So if you haven't heard about those, we did a previous coffee talk on that. Definitely check those out, those previous coffee talks, if you're not familiar with some of the things that I'm discussing, because we do have tests and we have ways to see if your pet is stuck in an inappropriate nervous system response. But these hormones are also really important because we need that system. It protects us, it helps us when it's working properly. Now, another channel of communication with the gut and the brain is going to be what we call the HPA axis. So this is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenals. Of course, thyroids and then gonads are also a big part of this too. These are helping to mediate cortisol, so the stress hormone cortisol, which is usually the first thing produced in an acute situation or stressor, but it's also going to be part of all the other hormones. So most people have heard of like thyroid hormone. So this is also a channel of communication, right? Without hormones, we need hormones. We need hormones to tell our cells what to do and to help work properly. So this is another area very, very important. Now, another area of communication is going to be the immune signaling. So this is where a lot of people don't realize this aspect of the gut, where we have the gut mucosa. We also have a mucus lining that is sitting on top of the gut mucosa. We have immune cells like secretory IgA that should be grabbing bacteria, toxins, protozoa, things that shouldn't be there, parasites, inactivating them and removing them so that it's not triggering the immune system to go into overdrive and have like a hyperactive response. That would be something like allergies. That's a hyperactive response that a lot of times starts in the gut and then manifests as ear infections, skin issues, licking, chewing at the paws, scratching. That's usually related to an immune signaling response that started originally in the gut. It's not actually at the skin. Yes, we do want to treat the skin, but we need to look to the gut. And this is where those cells, that immune cells that are sitting there in that gut mucosa, they are communicating with the enteric nervous system. So that first channel of communication that I mentioned right at the start. And this is where they'll release what we call cytokines. So they can be like cell signals, they can be inflammatory mediators, they can be things that are going to help calm down inflammation. These are the cells that are going to influence inflammation. And if your pet's dealing with an infection, very important, those cells, but a lot of times they can go into overdrive and then we end up having chronic health issues. And then the last channel of communication is going to be your gut bacterial metabolites. So when we think about like things like prebiotics, feeding, so inulin, your fructooligosaccharides, monooligosaccharides, so FOS and MOS, you'll see those on a lot of times probiotic supplements. Those are the food source for the bacteria. And then what happens is those bacteria are actually producing what we call short chain fatty acids. So these are going to be things like butyrate, propionate, acetic acid. Those are going to be doing a lot of different things for the gut mucosa, feeding the gut. They're going to be communicating, producing hormones. So they have very, very important properties. The other thing too is that a lot of people don't realize this, and it's a big, important thing, especially if you're dealing with a behavior issue with your pet, is those gut bacterial metabolites are also things like hormones and neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, and GABA. These are very important neurotransmitter that are going to help calm down, help with sleep. So if you have a pet that's like their sleep cycles are off, we're seeing cognitive decline, they're kind of hyper reactive, we may have an issue here. But don't worry, there's ways we can address it. Now, we need to look at also too. So, okay, we've got these channels of communication, but we need to also understand the sources of influence, right? Because if we're doing things that are potentially causing harm or disruption to those channels of communication, you're going to have a really hard time fixing it. And I see so many pet parents, you may be there yourself, where you're stuck in that vicious cycle of going back and forth to the vet clinic for the same health problem. We're treating symptoms with things like Apoquel, Cytopoint, even anti-anxiety medications, but we haven't fixed the actual source of what was creating the imbalance. So these are going to be things where think about what can influence gut health. This is going to be things like nutrition. So, right, the foods we're feeding, really, really important. We want to think about emotional health factors. So this is going to be, do we have a lot of stress? Do we have a lot of fear, trauma that we need to break through and heal? And there's a lot of great modalities out there to help our pets break through that. The other factors, the sources of influence that are going to affect these channels of communication are going to be physical. So pain's going to influence that. You know, think about we're in a chronic stress state because of the pain that we're feeling. Also to chronic illnesses or disease. So if your pet's dealing with allergies, IBD, autoimmune diseases, this is going to be impacting their gut microbiome. It's going to be impacting the gut-brain axis. And when we know that, we can do better, right? We can assess that, we can address it. Most important. Is anyone here dealing with any of these factors right now, or like kind of getting like that spark where you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that can impact the gut health? Let me know in the comments. I see you guys. Elaine, Marcy, thank you for commenting. Now, other factors that are really, really important that a lot of people disregard: environmental. So this is going to be things that can increase inflammation in the body. So pollutants. So if we live in an area where there's like a lot of smog or chemicals are being sprayed, also toxins. Now, a lot of times we think, okay, well, I cleaned up my house, I'm not using toxins in the house. We have to think about, okay, we can control a lot of that, but we can't control what the outside world is doing. So this will still be a factor for your pets. So I want you to think about your environment. Heavy metals, a lot of pets are born with this. We can get this from vaccinations. This is why not over vaccinating is one of the many reasons why it's so important to be aware of that. And then of course, allergens. So pollens, and if you're seeing your pet flare up, these are going to impact the gut-brain communication. And then finally, the immune system, right? So we've got gut health, nutrition, emotional health, physical, environmental, and immune. Ironically, those are all the 5 pillars of health that I teach about. So immune is going to be looking at what are toxins, of course, because that can aggravate, irritate. It's going to also be related to things like viruses or infections. So, a common one in people, and it can impact pets, not as significantly. Sometimes it can, so I'm not downplaying it. But Lyme disease is a big one. This pathogen is like a hidden pathogen, and it like stays in the cells and it hides and it aggravates the immune system. And then you can have flare ups when like your bucket overflows with too many stressors and we have too many layers that have built up and the body can't deal with it. This can happen with our pets too. So keep in mind all these sources of influence can actually impact your pet, and they might be fine one day and the next day they're having a massive flare up and you're like, what happened? And it's because there were these external factors and creating internal issues. And then what happened is they couldn't deal with it. So that's when we start seeing these flare ups. Even though it seems like you're doing all the things that you can, this is where I don't want you to focus on the next thing, that every pill for an ill, right? It could be an herb for every ill. We have to take that step back and remember that there's a reason why. Always ask why. That is like my motto. I chant it all the time with my community. Why? Why are we using something? Make sure we're not missing the root cause. This is key. This is the key how you treat an ear infection. We have to find the root cause and we need to be aware of these factors versus just looking for like Sally, her dog cleared an ear infection because she used a probiotic. Yes, they're a tool, but if you're missing the root cause, when you stop that probiotic or the things like the bucket gets too full again because there's external factors we didn't address, that's when it flares up again. So we have to look at the bigger picture. Don't miss the forest for the trees. If who here knows what I mean by that? Like thumbs up. So trees are the symptom, the forest is the bigger picture. We need to take a step back. Now there's some studies here to back up what I'm saying. I'm not just saying these things to just say the things, but there's some great studies from University of Oregon that actually show a clear link between aggressive behavior in dogs and the microbes that actually live in their guts. And so what they did is this study actually analyzed similar breed rescued dogs in a shelter setting. And they compared like the behavior with their microbiome status. So they did a bunch of stool testing. And yes, we can't say the exact relationship, with the between cause and effect, but they showed that the gut microbiome may actually contribute to the aggression and the severity of aggression, and that by manipulating the microbiome, so whether it's dietary changes, so they're changing the food, the nutrition, remember the source, probiotics, you can actually modify the behavior. Really, really cool, right? There's things that we can do where we don't have to reach necessarily for drugs. So the other study, so this was in Science Direct, it was produced on January or published on January 2020. It looked at the gut microbiome and adrenal gland activity in dogs with aggression and fear-related behavioral issues. So what it did is it actually looked at the dog's gut microbiome and the central nervous system. Remember these channels of communication. And it looked at the potential of using probiotics to actually restore the balance for behavioral issues. The other thing to keep in mind too is that because of this bidirectional connection between the brain and the gut, long-term stress, so remember that emotional health side, or like we need to be assessing our stress. Where are we at? How are we feeling? Are we managing our own stress? That's really, really important. Long-term stress scenarios actually influence the gut microbiome. So very, very important. And then finally, this is another study back in 2015 where chronic intestinal inflammation, so gut lining inflammation, was linked with behavioral disturbances such as cognitive impairment. So, these older dogs that are showing cognitive decline, we need to look to the gut, deficits in learning, and anxiety. So, big picture here, takeaways from these studies, from the research, from what we just talked about, all the communications that are occurring between the gut and the brain, is that we need to look to the gut and make sure our microbiome is healthy. And then we can use some of these tools. So here we are. Let's talk about what you can do. Who is excited to get some tools and tips on like what you can do to make sure that your pet is doing well? This applies to both dogs and cats. So yes, a lot of the studies are with dogs. Similar things are going to happen with cats. And we don't want to forget our little furry kitties because they're just as important and they are not talked about enough. So keep that in mind. Everything I am listing here can actually be applied to both dogs and cats. Really, really important. And so this is where, number one, First off, let's make sure we're assessing those 5 pillars, right? So physical health, emotional health, gut health, your immune health, and environmental health, because we want to be looking at, do we need to remove something? Very, very important. We need to remove the things that potentially are aggravating or creating inflammation or upsetting that balance. So we need to restore homeostasis. So specifically minimizing antibiotics and conventional drugs. Now, I'm not against drugs. I'm going to repeat that. I call myself a holistic vet. Being holistic does not mean that you have to be against ever using drugs. I can tell you, I share this all the time because it's 100% true. If I get hit by a car and I have a broken leg, please give me pain medications. This is not the time and the place for acupuncture. Yes, afterwards, please, like all the additional modalities and this, like things to get me back on track. But right at that acute moment, that emergency, sometimes we do need to use drugs. Quality of life is always most important. Keep that in mind. Drugs can help calm things down, get you faster results. They sometimes work faster than, what we're looking at with herbs and diet changes. So I don't want you to be afraid of using them when we use them appropriately. Okay, that's my soapbox for Friday morning. So, whether it resonates with you or not, that's okay. That is my personal belief and opinion. Take it for what it's worth. But we need to look at minimizing these drugs. I did a coffee talk on metronidazole. It is one of the most overprescribed conventional antibiotics. And the problem is that a lot of times when your dog has diarrhea or your cat has diarrhea, it is the first drug that your vet will reach for. My colleagues will reach for. I see it all the time. And the problem is that we know from research, for one, it doesn't work better than when you use a probiotic or when you do a diet change and you fast the gut. It doesn't. The second problem is that it can have lasting side effects for that microbiome for years, one dose. Years. The studies that I shared, I think it was like 4 months, but the study only lasted 4 months. But they've done studies in humans with with metronidazole or Flagyl, same thing. And what happened is that they found it affected things for years. So we need to make sure that we are equipping ourselves with the ability to use alternatives that work just as well. And so make sure you go back, watch that Dr. Katie Woodley, the Natural Pet Doctor YouTube channel, because I gave you some alternatives that work really well, very quickly for helping with diarrhea. Now, the other thing we need to be looking at is foods and like some nutraceuticals, right? So this is where processed foods, when we're talking about processed foods, we're talking about kibble or dry food diets. So these are going to be highly processed. They tend to also potentially be contaminated with glyphosate or Roundup. Now, Roundup is an antibiotic. It's an antibiotic. So it's directly impacting the shikimate pathway for the microbes in the gut. We have to be really, really careful when we're looking at the types of foods. Now, I know not everyone can switch to a raw food diet. I don't think every pet does well with a raw food diet, but we want to be looking at how can we lower the amount of processed food that's going into our dogs and our cats, and looking at, okay, let's add some fresh food toppers or other things that are going to reduce that amount, and bring down potentially those levels of inflammatory ingredients. Now, the other key thing, and there's studies that show that omega-3s, so your omega-3 essential fatty acids are really, really important, especially DHA. This is really important for brain development. So all you puppies and kitten owners, listen up. You need to be making sure that you're supplying a source of DHA, whether you're using an omega-3 essential fatty acid, but that's a necessary supplement as your kittens and your puppies are developing, because there's studies that actually show too low of omegas can lead to aggression. So we see, once again, that gut-brain axis, really, really important. So supplement with some omega-3 fatty acids. There's studies and a new test, or a newer test, it's been out for a little bit now, from Standard Process, that actually you can test the omega-3 status of your pet. And a lot of pets, even pets on a supplement, registered in the low to low end normal range. So no harm if you can't access those tests with your vet. You can still supplement, make sure we're not over supplementing. But this is definitely really, really important, because it's going to help support the microbes. It's going to support the cell membranes. It's going to support brain health. Now, the other thing is that we can look at probiotics. So probiotics should be live microorganisms that are going to help manipulate and modulate the immune system in the gut. Now, they don't typically colonize like a fecal transplant. So you've heard of like probably fecal transplants from like Animal Biome. There's Gut Restore capsules that you can use. You can use Animal Biome to test the microbiome to see if things are off. But there's a lot of research on probiotics. And I love the term that they use called psychobiotics, because we can actually normalize the response of the HPA axis and also help modulate the immune system. Now, what's really cool is they looked at some different like types of probiotics. There's a bunch of different types of strains. And this is where Bifidobacterium longum is one that, Purina did a lot of research with and developed a probiotic. I still think there's other brands in that, and just FYI, because of the additions of things like Animal Digest, I'm not a big fan of because of the rendered products. Check our probiotic talk that we did a couple weeks ago on our coffee talk if you want to check that video out for why that's not helpful. Now, Bifidobacterium brevi, Bifidobacterium infantis, Lactobacillus helveticus, Lactobacillus rhamnosus, Lactobacillus plantarum, and Lactobacillus casei. These are just some of the probiotics that have shown to impact and help with behavioral issues, because what they're doing is they're improving the immune system. They're also inhibiting the growth of pathogenic bacteria. And two, like Saccharomyces boulardii is a common beneficial yeast probiotic that can also be used to help if you do have to give antibiotics. Now, these probiotics, what they're also doing is they're modulating the central nervous system. So this is via the vagus nerve. Remember, we talked about those communication channels. So we have the enteric nervous system, and that's connecting to the vagus nerve, connecting to the brain. It's also going to be impacting the neurotransmitter levels. So remember, serotonin, your dopamine, your GABA, these are very important neurotransmitters, especially for seeing things like anxiety or behavior problems, chronic inflammation, leading into a decreases inflammatory cytokines. Remember the immune cells, the immune signaling that we talked about. And then, of course, the Bifidobacterium longum, there's studies that show that it actually improves the intestinal barrier. So if things like leaky gut, so we get that gut lining gets inflamed, we end up with these tight junctions. So it should be nice and tight. That gut lining, it's one cell layer thick. That gut lining becomes inflamed. It starts separating. And that's when we get things that are foreign to the immune system, like food, bacteria, toxins, passing through and creating chaos with the immune system. So if we can use things that are improving the intestinal barrier, there's lots of things. We talk a lot about leaky gut. We have an entire Better Gut Health program that's a self-paced course. So for anyone here dealing with chronic ear infections, skin issues, gut health problems, vomiting, acid reflux, go to thenaturalpetdoctor.com, go to our storefront and check out our course, because it's made for you. It's made to help you find the root cause and give you the tools to start healing the body and get it back into balance. So definitely check that out. So probiotics are a really helpful thing. Now, there's a lot with probiotics. I'm not going to go into the details of that. Watch our previous coffee talk. Now, mushrooms. I love medicinal mushrooms. These are the things like your button mushrooms that you would eat. These are, I'm not talking about psychedelic mushrooms. There's a time and a place for those things. I'm not going into that. I don't have a lot of background in that. But there was actually a 2021 article that talked about reishi mushrooms. So we have different types of mushrooms that will do different things in the body. Reishi mushrooms are really helpful at increasing the diversity of the microbiome. What that means is it's increasing the different types of strains of bacteria that we have. Very, very helpful. Keep in mind, everyone, I see some people asking about cats. All of these things are for both dogs and cats. Most dogs will probably eat mushrooms off that, like if you're like lightly cooking them and topping the food, using them as a superfood topper. Some cats will also eat mushrooms, especially if you cook it in like ghee. Ghee is a great fat source that cats love fat. So if we're cooking it in a bit of fat or, grass-fed butter, a lot of cats will actually eat it off their food too. But we can also use, I'm going to mention some brands that I love. But that reishi, it's going to improve serotonin levels too. Serotonin is really important for sleep, calming the nervous system down. And about 70 to 90% of serotonin is made in the gut. So if we can add in these amazing superfood sources, mushrooms are also a prebiotic to benefit and support and nourish the gut microbiome, those bacteria, really, really helpful. And I love Animal Essentials. Shout out to them. They're awesome. They're a great brand too. Making mushroom broth is a great option that you can use to, if you are feeding a processed food or a kibble diet, add that on top. Support the gut. This is where broth is really, really high in things like collagen. If you're using a bone broth, glycine, those are very soothing and healing to the gut lining. But add in mushrooms. It doesn't just have to be reishi. I use usually a variety of mushrooms, but if we're specifically looking for anxiety stuff, supporting that immune system, calming things down, definitely check that out. Real Mushrooms has a brand, or Real Mushrooms is the brand, and they have a supplement called Relax Blend. And it also includes things like valerian, which is very calming to the nervous system. It has lion's mane mushroom. So once again, if we have any anxiety, brain, nervous system inflammation, that's going to help calm things down. So especially your older pets, your cognitive decline, lion's mane is a great medicinal mushroom that you can add in. Taurine, that's going to also support the detox pathways, which is essential, right? This is part of the environmental pillars that we talk about. We need to open up those detox pathways, get those toxins out. L-tryptophan, L-theanine, these are other amino acids that are going to support the calming, support this, like reducing the sympathetic nervous system state. Catnip, who's ever used catnip? My cat, oh my God, God bless my cat Tico. We go outside, I planted catnip bushes. Now they're going like wild, which I don't mind at all. The bees love them. They're fantastic. I will pull off a little like branch of the catnip, and Tico will devour the entire thing, like the flower buds and everything. He is self-selecting. He absolutely loves it. Now, not every cat has the genes for wanting the catnip. But it's a great option. Super easy to grow, but it's part of this to help calm things down. Also, lemon balm or Melissa is in here. That's a great immune support herb. And then passion flower. So it's just a great all-around supplement. If you're looking at, you can access Real Mushrooms, the brand. Also, too, I know because Animal Essentials is here, they also have a lot of great options too for using like adaptogenic herbs. They also have some mushroom mixes that are all in tinctures that are very easy to give, especially to cats. So in the glycerin tinctures, they don't taste bad. I use them for my own cats. Because as you can see, Kiwi's walking around here. She's my senior cat. I support her body, and she can be very difficult to not create additional stress by medicating her. So I love the brands that have the things that don't taste bad, because then I'm not adding more stress, because more stress will affect the microbiome, which we don't want to do. And then I'm going to finish with 2 other herbs. And I'm going to talk next week about teas, because I've never really done a coffee talk on teas, but I love teas, and my community like calls me the tea doctor. So we might as well talk about some of my favorite teas and how I would use them for your pets. So make sure you join next week's coffee talk with the doc, where I'll go through more of this. Last week, I did talk about chamomile. Chamomile is a great all-around herb that's very safe to use, and the tea form is so easy and accessible and cheap for every single pet parent here. So if you have not tried chamomile and you're worried about gut health issues, you have an allergy problem, anxiety issues, fantastic. Brew a cup of chamomile tea, have one yourself, because we need to calm ourselves down too and relax. Take a deep breath, ground yourself, and then also give it to your pets. Very, very helpful. And then, of course, adaptogenic herbs like ashwagandha. This is going to help with modulating those adrenal glands. So especially when we've gone through a chronic period of stress or illness, or we're going through that, what's nice about adaptogenic herbs is that it's going to act as either the gas pedal or the brake, whatever the body needs, without putting too much pressure on either. It's a great balancer, a great harmonizer for the body. So those are really, really helpful. And I love that tip, Animal Essentials. You can also use bone broth to make the teas for the kitties. Smells amazing. Fantastic. Thank you for that tip. I love that. I see Kim, my dog, nips fresh lemon balm every morning. So chamomile, you brew a cup of tea, you pull the tea bag out. If you brew it for longer, it becomes more bitter. So if your pet's like, no thanks, mom or dad, brew it for less. Put the tea bag in, 30, even just 30 seconds, pull the tea bag out. You can mix it with the food. Very, very easy. You can offer it to your pets by itself. Most cats probably won't drink it. But also to another really neat way to introduce a lot of these herbs. So in a dried organic form to cats is use an herb garden. So this is where taking the dried herbs, a teaspoon of them, putting them down on a blanket or towel in a quiet room and allow the cat to self-select. So I mentioned Tico this morning. He self-selects the heck out of catnip. He loves it. But I also use herb gardens from Julianne Thorne, Naturally Cat. Shout out to her who introduced me to this amazing, beautiful idea of allowing our cats to self-select what they need. So putting down valerian, putting down your chamomile, your dried organic chamomile flowers, putting down things like lavender, using the things that are calming, right? That are going to help balance. We can put these down. Rosebuds are a great one. Make sure you're using organic and you're letting your cat choose what their body needs at that time. It's amazing. It is beautiful. Has anyone here used a herb garden with their cats? If not, definitely check it out. We do have a talk with Julianne also that goes through. It's super simple, super easy. I think people overcomplicate it or they just don't really realize that, like, okay, what's going on? But definitely check all those out because these herbs, they're doing multiple things. They're supporting the body in multiple ways. It's why I love holistic medicine, herbalism. We can look at our pet's constitution. I apply Chinese medicine also from the 5-element theory. We can look at the energetics of these herbs and these plants. We'll go into more detail with some of the tea talks that that are coming up. And we can pick the ones that fit with where they're at to help their body to heal versus just using something because someone said it works well. This is where we can dial that in and get more specific. If you're like, I don't know where to start, I don't know what to do, definitely check out some of our blueprint programs where we support pet parents like yourself that are struggling. They're feeling alone. They're feeling lost. They don't have a community. They don't have a holistic vet to guide them to find these root causes. That's exactly what we do in our blueprint to get you back on path so you feel confident, supported, and empowered. You are doing all that you can to help your pets live their best lives naturally. So definitely check that out. You can go to the link in our bio. You can always send us an email too to info@thenaturalpetdoctor.com. It is an application only program because it's a lifetime program. There's a lot of support for all of your pets that we provide inside that. But if you're dealing with things like acid reflux, allergies, ear infections, and you're like, I just want a program, go and check out our Better Gut Health program that we just relaunched as a self-paced program to help guide you. We've already gotten amazing feedback and results from it from previous clients and current people going through that right now to really better understand these connections. Very, very important. Remember, we need to take that step back. Don't miss the forest for the trees and make sure you're assessing those 5 pillars of health because the key to unlock true healing is within those 5 pillars. So I hope you guys found that helpful. I hope you join me next week for our coffee talk. We'll go deeper into some of like the teas and the herbs that I use and recommend for my patients, that I use for myself and I use for my own cats. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. I appreciate each and every one of you for taking time to learn more so you can do better and help your pets live their best lives. Take care, pet parents. I'm Dr. Katie Woodley, the Natural Pet Doctor.